Thanks, Carolyn. Democracy, it's a beautiful thing. Thanks for being such an active part of it. It really is very exciting to be here tonight. Thanks, Carolyn, for the invitation. Tonight is about bringing you and you together in a meaningful dialogue that helps inform Canberrans how to cast that vitally important thing in our democracy, their vote. As Carolyn said, we're going to keep it moving along crisply so we get maximum content in the available time. We're wrapping up at 9 o'clock. It's a part 1 and part 2 event. In part 1, each party grouping will be getting 1 minute at the top of their collective action to give a party introduction, and then each candidate will get 1 minute. That will be strictly endorsed by Rachel, who has a bell that's going to be incredibly powerful. And when you hear that bell, folks, finish the sentence, a short sentence, not a very, very long sentence, and then we will move on. After part 1, we will come to an even more exciting part of the evening, which is where you get to pitch questions, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that and how it will work after part 1. To lead us off, who's going to give the Greens party introduction? Go for it.
Hi, I'm Emma Davidson. Is this on? Yes? So I'm Emma Davidson. So I have been a member of the Legislative Assembly since the 2020 election. I have been the Minister for Mental Health, Minister for Population Health, Minister for Community Services, Seniors and Veterans, Minister for Corrections and Justice Health. For 3 years, I was also the Minister for Disability and for Youth Justice. And I am now also the Greens spokesperson for disability and for prevention of domestic and family violence and digital technology. And in my spare time, I try to remember to walk the dog. Now, the Greens understand that we're experiencing the layered up effects of a cost of living crisis, housing affordability crisis, and a climate crisis. And there's a lot of people out there feeling very uncertain about their future and wanting to know how they're going to make sure that they can take care of themselves and their family and the community around them. One of the beautiful things that we've seen over the last few years with everything we've been through as a community is that Canberra is a community full of people who are kind and compassionate and really care about each other. They really do want to look out for each other. So if we can provide opportunities for people to get their needs met and to be able to work together in a socially connected, collective way, we're going to be able to achieve great things. Now, in order to do that, we know that we need to build 10,000 more public homes over the next 10 years to wipe out that waiting list and make sure that we have enough public housing for our growing population. We know that we're going to need more access to primary healthcare so that people don't have their first experience of universal public healthcare when they reach hospital, that they actually get care from their GP for free. So we can do that by providing 4 bulk billing GP clinics, 2 on the north side, 2 on the south side. That'll give us another 160,000 free doctor's appointments each year. Well, we're actually hoping to combine ours into just one, if that's all right. Yeah. Yep. There's three more people here. Yeah. We know that this can be a really hard city to get around if you're not driving. And so we want to make sure that if we can get a bus every 20 minutes on weekdays or every 30 minutes on weekends, people will be able to have a choice about how they get around the city. To do that, we know we're going to need an extra 100 electric buses with drivers on the road. And if we do that, we will be able to provide that frequency of bus service. We'd also like to make sure that we're looking after our environmental volunteers, the people who are doing all the land care work, to make sure that we're looking after this beautiful country that we're on. So providing financial support to environmental volunteering groups and making sure that they're well supported, and that we're also employing more First Nations Indigenous rangers to be able to work with them on how we look after this beautiful environment that we're in, is also really important. We also want to make sure that we're making this city easy to get around for everyone. So that means shifting more of our focus from duplicating every highway out there to actually looking after the roads and footpaths that we've already got. If we can inject more funding into footpath maintenance, we can cut down the time it takes from someone reporting that something needs fixing from something like 180 days down to more like 30 days. make sure that we're looking after particularly the older suburbs around Woden and Western Creek, where, you know, the original footpaths were built decades ago, and we've got people who are really struggling to get around their own neighbourhood where they've lived there for so many years. We want to make sure that we're looking after people's mental health as well. So having a safe haven like the one in Belconnen in every town centre. You know, there's one already planned for the Canberra Hospital, and the work is underway to make that happen. But if we could also have one in Molonglo Valley, in Tuggeranong, in Dixon, in Gungahlin, then everyone in this city would be only a short trip away from being able to get mental health care when they're in distress without having to go to emergency. We know that that would make a big difference for people. We also want to make sure that if you are in a situation where you are having an emergency and you go to hospital, that you don't end up with bill shock from the ambulance at the end of it. At the moment, if you don't have private health insurance, then you can end up with quite a hefty bill for the ambulance, and we want to make sure that in an emergency situation that doesn't happen.
It's to the Liberals, 1 party minute plus another 4 individual minutes. However you want to slice and dice that. Take it away.
Share. We're a Democratic Party. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you all very much for coming out. Really appreciate you showing so much interest in the upcoming election. Caroline, my old sparring partner from the Assembly, we got elected together in 2008, and we had many battles, didn't we? So it's wonderful to see you still contributing to the community in the way that you are. So good on you. I was elected back in 2008, as I just said, so this is my 5th election, and each of them has a different feel to it. Some of them good, some of them not so good, depending which party you're in. And there's no doubt that for this one, the sentiment is it's time for a change. So when I'm out and about and you talk to the other candidates, they'll tell you similar sort of sentiment, that 23 years of one government is too long. And you're all smart people in here. You understand that if you have no change from party to party in a democracy, then the democracy is broken. And I think you can see that in the sort of results that we're getting. You look at the health system, you look at the education system, you look at planning, you look at the taxation system across the board, and it is failing Canberrans. And you're going to hear that, you hear it from the Greens, all the problems, and they've been part of that government for a long time. So it really is time for a change. What I'd also say is that we are the only party that can effectively deliver that change. You won't hear from the independents. I think there's one independent, but the party groupings, the sort of Fiona Carrick and the Canberra Independents, won't tell you who they'll support. They're mute about it. So if you do want change, if you do think 23 years of one side of politics is too long, then the only way to affect that change is to vote Liberal. I'd also make the point that we've put all of our positions on the table. We've got some more announcements to make, but on the big issues, you know where we stand. When it comes to stage 2B of the tram, and I'm happy to answer questions on it later, we don't support it. We're very clear on that. And again, you need to ask of the independents like Fiona and the Canberra Independents where they stand.
I'm Elise Hazelhurst, and I think that we need to future-proof Canberra. You're going to hear a lot of promises here tonight, and just remember who has been in power the last couple of years. As Jeremy said, the same 2 parties have been in power, and they keep saying that they are going to deliver better streets, better infrastructure, and they are failing in those areas. We hear it every day on the street, and I have attended many of these events over the past few weeks, and I keep hearing the same promises that they are going to deliver that they have failed over the past few years. And I think that's really important for us to remember, that for that to change, we need to vote for a new government, and that is the Canberra Liberals. And I want to stand as your elected member to make sure that I listen to community, I attend community events, and I'm here for you so that you know that I will stand up for you in shadow cabinet and party room and fight for the needs of the community members, of the issues that I hear every single day from my friends, my family, and all the community members around us. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Karen Walsh and I am a Liberal candidate for Murrumbidgee. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. My quick story is I'm from New South Wales and really care about the environment and agriculture. My current day job is working as a stakeholder engagement manager for Landcare Australia. So I really care for those environmental outcomes. I'm really motivated to serve Canberra. I've got 2 young children and I'm just really seeing the decline of the services available to them. And as a parent, as a person that's lived in Canberra for over 2 decades, I'm worried and I just want to be part of the team that provides better education outcomes for our children, provides a better healthcare system for the community and a government that serves everyone, not just a small subsect of it. You've got a really great motivated Liberal team that has a vision for Canberra and we are ready to serve and we just need that opportunity come 19 October.
G'day, I'm Ed. I'm your most recently elected MLA in this electorate. I've only been in the Legislative Assembly for a bit over 2 years. But from day one, I was out on knocking on doors and meeting as many people as I can across Woden, Western Creek, Molonglo Valley, the Inner South, getting to hear from everyone I possibly could. And let me tell you, there's been a really consistent message that's come back, and it's one that's been there for a very long time. It was probably at least 5 years ago that I was at a Woden Valley Community Council meeting and I had someone come up to me and say, we're missing out in the South. We should be able to take pride in our suburbs and our city, but right now things are going the wrong direction. We've continued to see that since then. I've continued to hear it every time I turn around, and it's definitely time for a change.
Good evening. I'm Andy Berry. I wasn't thinking I would be here about 5 weeks ago. It's a fairly new party. It's been newly formed into Canberra. It's the Mark II of the Family First Party, and to run a party on morals is interesting. When I first heard about it was from the Australian Christian Lobby, and I thought, let's go and see what this party has to offer. Let's see what they're about. And for me, some of the platform spoke to me. We're the only pro-life, outwardly speaking, pro-life party, which could be controversial. We stand for the family. We stand for, in our view, a mum and dad and a monogamous married relationship raising kids. We think this is a great platform for kids. I'm an architect and a builder. I've had apprentices that don't have that upbringing and they struggle. And we're not saying we're not for those other families, but we're building a platform on good values and moral values, but also compassion and empathy. And the hustings, my most enjoyable thing is probably talking to the homeless. I think recognizing a homeless person, I was talking to Carl. Carl wasn't quite homeless. He had an interesting story. Some of that was drugs that Carl struggled with. What are we doing to help these people other than just progressively, change our moral compass to say these things are progressive. Drugs are progressive, but yet we're not really helping the people. We have the highest recidivism rate in the country for a progressively, social, forward-thinking capital. What's going on? And of that, there's most incarcerated Indigenous population in the country. What's happened to our government? So Family First is a vote for Family First and morals, and hopefully you can question me. I think integrity is really important in all things that we do. I would not run my company. I would not be able to run my company the way the government runs the financials.
Hello, my name's Andrew Kopp. I'm also standing with Family First. I'm married, have one grown-up daughter, and am one of 5 children. I've lived in Canberra for 30 years, bought and sold 3 houses, rented, and live in Right Molonglo. I grew up with my parents running a small business, and for 40 years I've worked in government and as a contractor. I'm active in Christian community. I conduct training and am on my church's leadership team. Through this, I stay connected with local community. I've done a lot of door knocking to hear directly from people, and I understand there are barriers with the disadvantaged being heard, and I'll take active steps to engage with them. About your interests and Family First, we're committed to reducing the cost of living pressure on families, and we'll do that by halving rates.
Hello, my name is Fiona Carrick and I'm standing as an independent in the election. The reason why I'm standing is because I'm passionate about community. I'm a local. I moved into Woden in 1968 and I'm committed. I've been the president of the Woden Valley Community Council since 2016 and I stood aside earlier this year to run the campaign and thank Caroline for taking over the Community Council. It's been fantastic. I have ambition for the Woden Town Centre. We've lost a lot here. Pitch and Park, Bowling Greens, tennis courts, YMCA, the indoor sports stadium, now the pool and the ice rink have been sold to Geocon. For housing, housing is important. We need housing, but the towers that we're building, they should give back to the public realm. There should be trees and green spaces around. I want to see the economic development of the town centre. And to do that, we need to make it a destination and we need to have our social infrastructure. We're the only electorate that doesn't have an arts centre and we should have one. We need an indoor sports stadium desperately. The Dodgers are trying to play across 6 school halls. We need a pool. Our pool is going to turn into a 25-metre pool at the bottom of a Geocon tower. We've got kids breaking into the tower pools because the local kids want to swim. So I think we also, if you have a look at the city maintenance, have a look at our town square. We were in there today. The graffiti and the tagging is terrible. The stage is broken. It's just not a pleasant place to be. It should be maintained. It should be better. It should be active. It should have cafes, restaurants and bars all around it. We need to plan it better and we need ambition to invest in it. We're also interested in transparency and genuine consultation and managing the budget so that we can reduce the growing debt. Budgets are about prioritisation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maria Fatsis and I'm happy to support Fiona Carrick to be elected. I have a track record in standing up for my community, both as former chair of the Inner South Canberra Community Council, which is how I met Fiona, and also before that as president of the Yarralumla Residents Association. And also I have a background both in the public sector, running my own small business, and also as a community advocate. Now, I looked at the survey results of the Woden Valley Community Council and I noticed that the thing that people said was really important to them in this election and in terms of their values was access to parkland, green space, and also the protection of the natural environment, which is also similar to what came out of the Inner South Canberra Community Council survey. So bearing that in mind, Fiona Carrick Independent will support protection of the environment, naturalisation of Yarralumla Creek and tree canopy cover.
Hello. Hello, I'm Bruce Payne. I'm also standing as a support for Fiona. I noticed the survey results talk about concerns about the lack of accountability, transparency and integrity from the current Labor Green government. That government, they very rarely, just as example, very rarely make clear how much government spending is just providing the extra services required as business as usual as Canberra's population grows, compared to what is actually, or if any, is actually increasing services on a per capita basis. They basically prefer to portray all spending as great new initiatives, and we're seeing that during the current campaign. I think there's also been deficiencies in integrity and accountability in recent years. I think these basically flow from no independent being elected to the Assembly since 1998 and from Labor Green currently having an overwhelming majority in the Assembly. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Paula. I'm a resident of Tifley. So what I bring to this space is And one of the issues I'm really passionate about is community safety. And I bring that expertise of working over 20 years in the community sector service, working with very vulnerable people, working with people and families that poverty is still a big issue out there. So I bring all of that experience to be able to make sure that, we look after the grassroots of our community that really need the support. It's great to build great, big, fantastic things, but if you don't have the money to take your children to these events held in these great, big, fantastic things, then, that's an issue. That's an issue that if a mother is having to make a choice of whether she can feed her family or her young children want to go to an event. So we really have to be really real about caring about our community, caring about our people, and caring about the issues that actually really align with our Future Generations Act as well. Think forwardly, think about the future, think about the children, the grandchildren, that we need to leave this environment, this space. We need to leave them something. And if we don't, then, that sits on their shoulders today. And as Marissa and I were at a local school speaking last week, these kids ask some really amazing questions. They're worried. They're worried about the future. They want to know about what's going to happen when they grow up. And they are a brutal bunch of questions that they threw at us, but it's like, wow, if I was one of their parents, I would be so proud of what was important to them. It should be important to us.
Thank you, Paula. Hello, I'm Anne-Louise Dawes. I'm also with Independence for Canberra. I also live in Chifley. We're at opposite ends of the planning spectrum, Paula and I. Paula lives in a gorgeous new residence built on a block. They knocked down something quite unsound. I live in still a tiny little house in Chifley that's like a tennis racket, and so I get the need for density in Woden. I'm descended from the Brendabella Franklins. They had Brendabella Station before Canberra, so I've been here a really long time. I'm attracted to Independence for Canberra because they want to get behind good ideas. We're hoping to get a few elected to the crossbench. We hope we can work with other independents if we're on the crossbench. Both parties often say, who will we form with? Well, we'll form with anyone who's pleasant to us, Jeremy. We're not in a position to come out and say who we'd form government with, but we're flattered that you think we'll get enough in that we'll be in a position to form government.
Good evening. My name is Rima, and I'm running as an independent candidate for Murrumbidgee. I am running because I believe our community deserves genuine representation that's not influenced by party politics or special interest groups. I moved to Australia, to Canberra from Lebanon in 1997, and for 14 years, I cared for my son who had a disability and complex health needs. During that time, I met remarkable individuals. I met sick children, children with special needs, neglected children, parents facing hardship, compassionate nurses, dedicated volunteers who gave their time to look after those in need. This experience has made me learn compassion and resilience. It also taught me the importance of community support and the importance that each member of our community deserves their voice to be heard. For years, I have thought about running for the assembly, but I hesitated. I'm just an individual. I don't have financial support. I don't have a party backing, nor I want that. And I don't have a big team of people helping me. Then a few months ago, I ran into an acquaintance that I had not seen for 12 years. I knew him on a professional level, and he was familiar with my journey. I told him, I'm thinking of running for the assembly. What do you think? And he said, I think you'll be great. And I told him, what do I have to offer the people of Canberra? And he said, honesty. At that moment, I decided to go for it. Without financial support, as an individual, with a group of friends and acquaintances who offered to help me, I decided to go for it. I stand for better healthcare, for bulk GP visits, for reducing wait times for surgeries, for affordable dental care, for affordable fertility treatments, for rate cuts, for affordable housing. I also stand for an enhanced bus network, for dedicated school bus for children, and I stand for involving our community in decision making and redirecting funds from projects to meet our community needs. Thank you.
Animal Justice Party.
Good evening. My name is Gwenda Griffiths and I'm standing as a candidate for the Animal Justice Party. I'm a medical specialist here in Canberra. I have lived in Canberra since 1978 and attended Murrumbidgee College for 6 years. I am a single parent and I have 3 daughters, 2 of whom I have got through school, one of whom is sitting next to me and one of whom is still at school. We live in Hughes, and they have attended over time Hughes Primary, Garran Primary, Tathra Primary when I was on one of my rural specialist training years, St Clair's College, Canberra College, and Girls Grammar. So we've been around the traps a bit. We are locals. This is not on my things to do list. I am a breast physician. I am a GP. I am a visiting medical officer at Queanbeyan, National Capital, Bruce Calvary and John James Hospital. The reason that I am standing for this election is I am fed up with the Labor and Greens government. I have worked in healthcare in Canberra since the year 2000, and I have seen the state that the Canberra ACT health system is in. I work in it daily. I hear patients. I see the lack of care. But the one reason I'm standing is that I walk on Red Hill, and I have seen what has happened there in the last 3 years with the slaughter of the kangaroos. This has been going on and has been supported by the Greens and Labor. In the last election, I voted Green, and I was absolutely shocked to find that when I thought I lived in a democracy, as I approached both Labor and the Greens, I met a closed door. No one would talk to me. Usually a DR in front of my name at least gets me a courtesy of a response. So we need change. Is that 1 or 2? That's 2. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ashley Griffiths and I'm a support candidate for Gwenda Griffiths for the Animal Justice Party. I have grown up in Canberra for 21 years now, like my mum said, going to St Clair's, and I'm now studying at the University of Canberra doing a Bachelor of Medical Radiation Science. I've always loved living in Canberra for one of the main reasons being the bush and our native animals. I decided to run this year after seeing the devastating effects that our current government is having on the bush and native animals, specifically in Red Hill and the surrounding reserves. If elected, my main point is to stop the cull of the eastern grey kangaroos, as I find it barbaric and completely unnecessary. And like my mum, I've been shut up by the Labor and Greens government when I try and question it, specifically as a younger person of this generation. While looking through the survey that the Woden Valley members submitted, I've spotted that they were more interested in keeping the Phillip Pool, which I completely agree with. I believe that we need Phillip Pool to stay, as I myself, and I'm sure you guys have, spent countless weekends and summers there enjoying the lovely facilities. I was in a wheelchair for 2 months and a crutches for 4, and I have experienced the damage of these paths. And that's my time, so thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Australian Labor Party.
Hello, my name's Marisa Patterson. I'm one of the candidates for ACT Labor. So I'll speak briefly about Labor's plan for Murrumbidgee. So ACT Labor represents a practical, proven and progressive choice for Canberrans this election. We have a vision to see this city be the #1 most livable city in the world. We're currently #2 and we have a vision to see it as #1. But to achieve this, we must hold strong to the things that we value most about Canberra. So our beautiful bush and green spaces, the strength of our community spirit, along with significant investment in health, education, transport and community facilities, and significantly increasing housing options and affordability for Canberrans, recognising that many people are doing it tough at the moment with the cost of living crisis. We have achieved significant progress in law reform this term with voluntary assisted dying laws, decriminalising personal possession of drugs, affirmative consent laws, the Carers Recognition Bill, and raising the age of criminal responsibility. It has been a great honour and privilege to serve the Murrumbidgee electorate this term. I've lived here for nearly 20 years. I have 3 kids, nearly all teenagers now. I was elected in 2020 after an academic career as a social policy researcher. And I strongly value evidence-based policy making, which I apply to all my work I've done this term, particularly in the area of criminal justice reform, addressing gambling harm, and working to protect our bush environment and native animals. I think Woden has some unique challenges. It's a growing part of our electorate, a changing part of our electorate, and recognising that change takes time. You've got to bring people with you, but it's also really exciting. Woden Valley has a great future. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Nelson Tang. I'm the Labor candidate in the area and I live in Curtin. I'm standing up for a more livable South Side because I want to improve the local services that my family depended on when they first migrated to Australia. My parents moved to Australia to give me a better opportunity. And like many who have moved to Canberra, they were drawn to Australia by the high quality of life, access to local shops and strong community services. Now, growing up, we didn't have much and we relied a lot on the public government services, public transport, public schools, public healthcare. And it was through public education system that I got to study at the ANU, which is when I first moved to Canberra and become a government lawyer. I work at the Attorney General's Department now, and I want to take the next step. But it was through that experience that I saw firsthand how a robust social infrastructure is created, not by chance, but by determined government. And I'm going to take the next step and put my hand up to become a member.
That was a fantastic opening. What a respectful and beautiful place it is to do politics. Go us. So let's keep that beautiful tone up now as we move into questions. It's going to be questions from the mic, one at a time. If you can just queue away from the mic to give the questioner an opportunity to be heard in a relaxed fashion, and then answers 2 minutes max, then there'll be the bell. So if you can, think policy, don't play the person, and let's see how much information we can get out and share to inform votes so much better than otherwise. First question.
Well, my question's about government integrity. I'd direct this to Chris Steele if he were here, but he's the most senior minister in our electorate. Anyway, so I think it's fair to say the electorate's been shocked in recent years at the series of reports from the Auditor General and other sources about failures in governance. Failures in governance. We've heard of. Okay. Right. So my question is, well, it's got to be some examples, right? You know about the Curtin Primary School, the CIT debacle, the IT contract that cost us $75 million and didn't go anywhere. So the question is to anyone who'd like to answer it, what can be done to improve the governance in our parliament and reduce the waste in government that we've experienced over the last 4 years?
It's not been directed to one person, so anyone who would like to answer gets 1 minute.
Look, I won't give you a specific answer because there's a lot of problematic issues, but there's an old expression that politicians are a bit like nappies and they need to be changed every now and again for the same reason. They become very, very dirty after a while. This is a government that has lost control of its bureaucracy. It is not accountable, and you see no ministerial accountability. The reality is if you want to see a change in that culture, you must see a change in the government.
From the family first, I would say integrity. When I was growing up, and I'm not that old, there weren't a lot of career politicians, and I think now politics is a career, and I think it's important to get some sort of foundation before you choose to represent people.
We need to hold the government to account. Project management, you look at the scope of the project, the budget for the project, and the timeframes for a project. If they're slipping, you need to know why. You need to be monitoring them. We've got a legislative assembly that's got 25 members at the moment. Well, for the last 23 years, Labor, and since 2008, Labor Greens have had the numbers. Everything goes through. We've got no upper house of review. We've got no local government to love us. We've got very limited checks and balances in our system. We have a committee system where 2 of the 3 members of the committees are the Labor Greens government, and they don't seem to investigate themselves very deeply. I think for governance, we can strengthen the committee system, and we can separate the role of the Chief Minister and the Treasurer for a start.
So
Oh, me. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I would say that I think it's government's job to continuously improve the governance structures of our projects and policy positions and the public service. And this in all areas of government is what we've been doing over the last 4 years. The Integrity Commission began in 2019, and they have been investigating the projects that have been discussed before, and I think there's really good findings and learnings out of these things. And you need a commission like that. You need the Auditor General's office. I do think we do have good checks and balances over things, which is why these projects have come to light. And we continuously need to improve. Like, there's no end stop or end point in this, and government always needs to learn lessons from these things. And I think, yeah, that's what we're committed to doing over the next 4 years.
I think I would like to add that I think all politicians need to be reminded that this is a democracy and that they are there to do what is best for the people that have elected them. This is a very secretive government. It's a very non-communicative government. It's very hard to talk to the MLAs. And so I think the government needs to, the other thing I would say about things like the CIT, there clearly aren't checks and balances in place. This got way too far. If there were adequate checks and balances and independent reviews, not ministers appointing their own reviewers, then quite possibly some of these things would have been brought to light and cost people a lot less money.
I think that's a really important question, particularly as our city is growing and the complexity of the services that we're delivering in this city is continuing to grow. To make sure that we've got the right governance, the right financial management processes in place to make sure that things go well. Now, when the things have happened within areas that Greens ministers have been responsible for over the last few years, where something's been brought to our attention that actually we think something's not right here, what we've done is we've gone and asked for an independent review to be done. When that review has come back, we've published that so that everyone can see this is what has actually been found. And then, for example, in the case of one of our mental health facilities, we appointed an independent board to oversee the recommendation. So it wasn't up to a politician to decide was this recommendation completed adequately or not. It was up to a group of independent people who were there on merit for their expertise in that area. Now, we think that there need to be some ongoing measures put in place, like an independent hospital board, for example, in our health system, to ensure that things continue to go in the right direction.
The ACT was the only jurisdiction in the country to support the referendum. Most of us in Canberra don't realise that we have absolutely shocking closing the gap statistics. The Productivity Commission highlights the importance of self-determination in order to turn their statistics around. There are two particular assets, Boomanalla Oval and the Ngunnawal Bush Healing Farm, which Aboriginal people in the ACT have been desperately wanting to be returned or transferred to community control for a very long time. The question is, would you candidates, commit to transferring those assets to community control within 12 months of the election?
Can the speaker, whoever's speaking, please announce who they are first, please?
So I was involved with, I'm Paula from Murrumbidgee. I was a part of the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander elected body. I've been on that body for 7 years. And that body, I refer to that body as like a little baby version of The Voice. We work very closely with the Labor government, and we build really good relationships with Director Generals, with different portfolios. I had Transport Canberra and City Services, and I can very clearly say that Boomanalla was always heading back to community control. When I first acquired this directorate, you need a machete to even see the grass on the oval. So the immense work that was put into bringing that oval back to where it is today via the elected body, via the Labor government and their support, it certainly is going to go back to community, but it's going to go back with the support of Transport Canberra City Services to a state that is going to be able to be enjoyed by the community. And the same with, I think, the Bush Healing Farm. That's on its way back as well, I believe.
Yep. It's okay, I can go after this. Okay, thank you. Yes, so the Labor government is committed to giving the oval back to community control. We absolutely are committed to improving the outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here in the ACT. And so there's currently a review underway in terms of Indigenous incarceration, and we have far greater targets than the rest of Australia in terms of reducing Indigenous incarceration rates, and we fully expect to meet those targets. There's a review underway at the moment, which is co-designed with the Aboriginal community in the ACT, that will provide recommendations in how we can reach those targets. The same with the child protection issues in the ACT. So we implemented a children and an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Children's Commissioner to oversee the child protection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in the ACT. And we're fully invested in implementing the Our Bura is Our Way recommendations. Hi, Emma Davidson, ACT Greens. Now, the Greens are absolutely committed to supporting self-determination, and that includes for Boomanalla Oval and for Ngunnawal Bush Healing Farm. In addition to that, we would also like to see Aboriginal community-controlled organisations better supported to really grow and be able to do their work in a well-resourced and well-supported way. We know that there are some gaps in the range of services that people can access through Aboriginal community-controlled organisations. So we'd very much like to see them supported to be able to self-determine for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people how they access things like health services, housing services, disability support services, and a range of other things. As an example of the kinds of things the Greens have done, we have increased the number of Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations in the ACT in the last 3 years, and we've also increased funding for the ones already here.
Fiona Carrick. We also are committed to the return of Boomanalla Oval to community control, also the Bush Healing Farm, but we'd like to see some planning around it so that when it is transferred, it's successful. We're committed to the implementation of the Albury's Our Way report and support for community organisations that provide wraparound services to support families.
It's a simple yes and a yes on the two specific things, but fundamentally we've been talking about these for far too long, and it should have already happened. And when you look at the state of closing the gap in the ACT, it's absolutely appalling. We are the capital of Australia and we should be doing better. We have the worst Indigenous incarceration rates in the country. My Aboriginal cousins, they asked me, why is it that we're expected to put up with worse health and dental care than everyone else? It's time to get on and actually make a difference and stop talking platitudes.
Billions of dollars are being abused and wasted on torturing animals to death, kangaroos, magpies, the brumbies. They're actually heritage listed and they should be protected. And the infertility program is genetically altering them, committing mass extinction, 1080 poison baiting, and the list goes on. The Animal Welfare Advisory Committee are not animal welfare. They're all involved in committing animal cruelty. The question is who's going to put a stop to it and spend all that money on establishing a Medi-animal care service, free bulk billing for all pensioners and low-wage income earners.
Mum won the microphone. Well, simply, the AJP has three main policies in the ACT election. We actually have policies on everything, but the answer is the Animal Justice Party is absolutely committed to stopping culling the kangaroos in the ACT reserves. We are opposed to 1080. It is a cruel, brutal and prolonged death. One of the most abhorrent things that we found out was the kangaroos and wallabies that are slaughtered on our ACT reserves are actually butchered on site at some of the reserves, are injected with 1080 and passed on to farmers to then poison our native dingoes. This is all very secretive. So the answer is we will also, the second platform that the AJP is offering is VetiCare, which is as it sounds, it's for low-income families, low-income people to actually be able to access affordable vet care for their pets.
Well, who knew that the Canberra Liberals and the Animal Justice Party would be so united on such an issue? But we're calling for a moratorium into the kangaroo cull. We're not convinced by it at all. And what we'll do is have a pause, have a moratorium, conduct a proper process. But until someone can convince us that it is the right way to go and we remain unconvinced, then we'll have that moratorium.
So one of the things I've been working on a lot this term has been the protection of our common native species. So I think overall, it's not just about kangaroos. I think our dingoes, I mean, they're classified as wild dogs when we bait them, but when we talk about them in a protection sense, they are called dingoes. And so I think that's not good enough either. I think our wombats are suffering from development in our new suburbs, and there's been some work done, and I've advocated strongly to see them protected. The mange issue with our wombats, we focus very much in environmental protection of endangered species, which is great and fair enough, but very little attention is placed on our common native animals. And I'm really passionate about seeing this brought to the forefront, and we start counting our common native animals, we start counting the roadkill on our roads, and a wildlife vet is something that we've advocated for through the Environment Committee for the last few years. And definitely we have to be doing something about wombat mange because it's a serious issue in our community, in our wombat community.
Andrew Kopp, Family First. With Family First, we put families first, and kangaroos in the ACT do become overabundant And it is important to actually manage a population that's overabundant, but in a humane way. Family First will be more concerned in lots of ways about road safety, people being injured, taxi drivers not going certain roads early in the morning. So that would be where our focus would be, though we recognise humane care for animals.
Anne Louise Dawes, Independents for Canberra. We agree in part with what the Labor Party is saying, that we need to look at the system as a whole. We are the bush capital. If we choose to live in the bush capital, then we need to accept that that requires some conservation and preservation of green spaces, and also the weighing from an evidence base of what various flora and fauna need to exist. So at Chifley, we live at the base of Mount Taylor. There's never been culling on Mount Taylor, and the residents of Sheehan Street and Parkhill Street do have to slow down. We saw roos on Hawkesbury Crescent in someone's lawn. So in Independence for Canberra, we have a Futures Act. We want to look at all policies with a view to what does Canberra want to look like in 10 or 20 years' time, and that would be weighing these things.
Okay, so I'm here basically as a carer asking sort of questions in regards to that. And basically what I want to know is what any of the parties are willing to commit to in terms of supporting wellbeing for carers.
Yeah, that is a really important question. I'm currently the Minister for Carers. We've got well over 50,000 carers in this city, and the toll that it takes on them to do what they do is something that we need to be very mindful of and be looking for ways to support them. The Greens would like to see carers supported through a few different mechanisms, one of which is a carers card that will make it easier for carers to navigate that bureaucracy of trying to help health services, education services, employers, whoever it is that you're in contact with, to better understand what you need as a carer to be able to do what you're doing within those different environments. One of the things that we saw work really well over the last few years during COVID was actually respite grants for carers. And one of the reasons why it worked so well was because government didn't try and be too restrictive and prescriptive about it. They just provided the funding to organisations that actually know and support carers and let them work out how to provide that funding to people in ways that helped them to manage.
Thank you very much for your question. And ACT Labor strongly values carers and the role they play in our community. We are also very committed to a recognition card to enable carers to access services more easily. We're also committed to developing a second action plan for carers and see a purpose-built respite centre for carers in the ACT. We've seen ACT Labor introduce and pass the Carers Recognition Act, Suzanne Orr, in this assembly. And I think we have a long way to go. Dementia, we have the highest rates of dementia in Murrumbidgee electorate in the whole of the ACT. It's 1.5 times just about anywhere else. So carers play a huge role in this. And so I think there's a really big conversation about the role carers play in dementia care, and also around voluntary assisted dying. That's where I've had engagement with Carers ACT. And I think there's a lot more that I think the conversation about voluntary assisted dying, we heard from, I'll continue that in another question. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rima Diab and I'm an independent. So as I mentioned earlier, I was a carer for my son for 14 years, and I'm also currently a carer for my father who's 86, and he's got a severe heart and lung condition and he's on home oxygen, and that's why I was late this evening, apologies. So on my platform, I have called for support for carers through programs such as physical health programs, recreational programs, such as calling on the federal government to increase the funding for the NDIS and aged care so that the carers can actually get more time away. They can have more respite away from their loved ones. I also called for outreach programs so that our professionals can actually reach out to carers, call them, check on them, make sure they're okay before they actually reach a low points in their life and actually needing help. Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to say, in addition to those good ideas about Respite and the carers card, foundation support, so training people to help the carers and to help the people that are being cared for, and also job flexibility for the carers so that they have got, they can, care.
Karen Walsh with Canberra Liberals. So the Canberra Liberals this issue actually has bipartisan support, but specifically we will be providing more funding for disability advocacy, and we will also be appointing a specific disability liaison officer at ACT hospitals. We'll also be providing better access to diagnosis services for neurodivergent children and support for our disability workforce. We've been really honoured to be able to specifically provide $350,000 to advocacy for inclusion, $150,000 for ACT Down syndrome and intellectual disability, and $200,000 to women with disabilities in the ACT, and then $175,000 to Mental Health Community Coalition ACT.
I don't think we're going to answer on every question, but that's a very important one. And I think that's one that you shouldn't have to be asking. You shouldn't have to ask your government, what are they going to do for you to help a carer? You're in a very traumatic place. And we go through a system where you're made to fill in forms and find information that you don't know about to seek funding or to seek help that you're not even sure exists because no one's helping you to navigate the system. And I think we should be helping those disadvantaged to navigate the system. We don't. There used to be that at Access Canberra. You used to go there and say, what do you want today? A very simple job, but it's immensely important. When you're in stress in looking after someone, you're not sure, you don't have the time to do these things. I don't think it's fair that you have to ask.
Okay, now we're going to have an online question that Rachel's going to read out.
This is a question from Karen online. I would like to ask why, when the Greens can list off individual items they are going to work on, the Democrat Liberal candidates always say that the public know what their platform is and then criticise the Labor Party. The question is it doesn't really have a question. Yeah, I'll go on to the next one. And Karen, can you ask the question, please? Penny online says, I would like to know why the community weren't consulted on the Phillip pool and the change from a 50 metre to a 25 metre pool. The users of the pool were not consulted.
So I think that sounds like a question to Marissa Patterson. And I think as it's specific, you get 2 minutes.
Okay. Yes, so Phillip Pool, very happy to have a chat about that. So there was a consultation process through the planning, the district strategies review that went on. I also conducted a survey in the community around what the community wanted to see, and I provided a submission to the consultation advocating for a 50 metre. It was sort of split between an indoor-outdoor pool. Ultimately, I think the case with Phillip Pool is that the pool is at the end of its life. Speaking to the previous owners, Geocon owns the land. I don't think it's a particularly great outcome to see a public pool at the bottom of a Geocon tower. My personal opinion is that Geocon might like to pay their way out of their lease and
provide funding for a swimming pool in Woden. I swim. I'm a strong advocate for swimming pools and the benefit that they have to the community. I go to the Sizak pool in Belconnen, and it doesn't matter day or night. That pool is full of, and that centre is full of many, many different people participating in many activities. So I'm a strong advocate for a pool in Woden, but I do think there is a limited life on the current Phillip pool that basically is only able to open for 4 months of the year. It's not, I guess, a viable long-term option. So I will advocate for a pool, but not necessarily saving the current Phillip pool. So thank you.
We'll be making announcements in due course, but this is a thing that the Canberra Liberals have never supported. We've had real challenges with what has occurred there. And Marisa, you're breaking away from the government's position there. I mean, the government's got rid of that pool. They shouldn't have. We need those facilities in Woden.
I've been an avid swimmer most of my life. I've taken the girls to most of the pools around this area until they closed, and then we'd move on to the next one. Deacon Pool was our swimming lessons, and then it became King Swim, which is great for swimming lessons, but incredibly hot. You can't swim there, and the pools are very small. And that, I believe, was actually not the original deal. There was meant to be a pool for the public there. We've lost almost every pool. There's something very special about outdoor pools in Canberra. We almost don't have one anymore. I just don't know why Phillip Pool was ever sold, but they need to actually reverse that decision, and they need to put the money into actually resurfacing the pool. Manuka can do it. Queanbeyan can do it. So I think we need that pool, and it needs to stay where it is.
Emma Davidson, ACT Greens. The Greens would very much like to see the community get involved in deciding what kind of public swimming pool should be built to replace the old Phillip pool on ACT government-owned land. We would like to see a range of community sports groups and people who are using the pool involved in that conversation, including community sports groups, but as well as people with disability who also use pools regularly as well.
Fiona Carrick, I've been advocating to save Phillip Pool since 2016. It's been a slow-moving freight train to see this. We could all see what was happening and nothing was done about it. Something could have been done about it, but it wasn't. And for the amount of advocacy we've had, starting groups, starting the Facebook Save Phillip Pool group, we've been getting out there with our Save Phillip Pool shirts, yet nothing has been done. And late last year, the zoning changed to allow the loss of the removal of the ice rink and the Phillip pool, the 50-metre pool, and have the 50-metre pool turned into a 25-metre pool at the bottom of a tower. That happened late last year in the planning review. It didn't need to happen, but nobody was out there saying anything to save it. I can't recall any MLA who was out there saving it. Julia Jones was. Julia Jones was. We did a petition with Julia Jones. Yeah.
Next question.
Yeah, you want to see my petition?
No, next.
So my name's Nick Houston, and I'm the convener of a group called Fund Football Fairly, and by football I mean soccer. And I want to raise the question of the stadium. And I think the Liberals have committed $600 million to build this new corporate stadium in the city, and I think the Labor Party have committed $800 million to build this stadium. Let's just round that up to $1 billion each. Okay, so we are a grassroots lobby group, and we work with Capital Football and the local football clubs, and we're looking to get better infrastructure down at the grassroots level. And the reason for that is that the question is, and for the 20,000 people that play football and their families, 60, 70,000 people historically underfunded, and there's a crisis within the local football grounds. So my question is, will the parties that have committed to $1 billion on the stadium, will you put that money into grassroots sport first and not just, and it's swimming pools and it's the things that Fiona's talking about and it's sports centres in Woden. The question is, will you put money into grassroots before the stadium? Because this is the grassroots speaking here.
Yeah, Emma Davidson, ACT Greens. The Greens would very much like to see community sports invested in. We know that we've got uneven oval surfaces. We know that we've got people in Molonglo Valley that are looking for shared sports facilities. There are people in Woden that are looking for multi-use indoor sports facilities. We think that this is actually a priority so that everyone can get out and play.
I've been advocating for an indoor sports stadium since 2016 when, to my horror, I saw it be degraded and eventually demolished. We desperately need indoor sports facilities. It's great to get people together, to have young people come out of their rooms, out of their devices, all different demographics. It's good for our physical and our mental health, and we really need it. The poor old Dodgers, our local basketball team, are playing across 6 school halls and a church hall, and trying to manage the facilities, manage the logistics is terrible. I've talked to people and they just don't play because it's too difficult. You've got to drive to Belco or to Tuggeranong. We need to have these sort of facilities to build up our own local community. So anyway, we will strongly support grassroots sports.
And football within that.
Football, volleyball, all of them.
Elise Hazelhurst, the Canberra Liberals. We are very much dedicated to local sports and supporting local sporting facilities, and announcements will be coming out as we announce all of our local policies in the coming days and weeks. And we did support this in the last election as well, making sure that we support grassroots sports because we know how important it is for families and for also the members of the community who play these sports. Thank you.
Ashley Griffiths from the AJP. I can personally speak about the grassroots soccer issue. I played soccer up until year 6 and I stopped because we didn't have the correct funding. We were an all-girls team and we were wearing men's uniforms and we got kicked off our games half the time. So I've now moved to a different sport, but I really believe that grassroots sports need to be supported. I've seen sisters, especially younger girls going to an all-girls school, stop their sports because there isn't enough facilities or support for them to enjoy it. So I really believe, especially soccer in Canberra is a big sport. It just doesn't get enough acknowledgement. So I think that's really important and the AJP will support that. So thank you.
So thank you for the question, Nick. Labor is very committed to grassroots sport in the ACT. Since 2016, we've seen the upgrade of 38 out of 56 pavilions to see female change rooms at all these pavilions, and we're committed to delivering on the rest of them next term. Investment in local sports, playing fields in Taylor and in Stromlo, a new tennis centre, and Woden, yes. So we're committed and bringing a commitment this election for a feasibility study for an indoor sports centre attached to the Woden Valley School that will come in the future. And I've advocated, I've had 2 petitions in the Assembly for the Woden Valley community, Woden Valley Soccer and the Western Molonglo Soccer Group to see upgrades of lighting and change rooms at those playing fields. It is something that as ACT Labor is strongly committed to grassroots sport. It is a priority for us and it's something we've been investing in strongly for the last 8 years and will continue to.
Hello, Rima, Independent. I would also support funding indoor and outdoor sports facilities, including the grassroots sports. I am myself a Zumba instructor, and I really believe in the physical and mental benefits of exercise, so I would fully support that as well. Thank you.
I think it's easy to say that we would support the grassroots as well in involved in sports, and that goes back to our community, goes back to our children. We need to start investing in them, and we need to start investing in them. We talk about the cost of living. It's not the cost of living, it's the cost of surviving for families out there, single parents who have to make a choice whether they can afford to buy their little ones footy boots if they're a talented young person, things like that. So I think we really need to invest in our children, care about the part of our community that need us the most. And, you know, what's a better way to keep young people out of trouble is invest them into sports. Take up all of their time, make them busy so that they don't have any time to, you know, think about anything else. But also grow, you know, grow their well-being, grow their mental health, get them out get vitamin D into the sunshine. You know, one of the proud things of Boomanalla is that we have a female change room, and the rest of the community do utilise Boomanalla at this moment for their sporting events. So, you know, we're kind of thinking of the gender diversity as well. Something that's important.
I just want to add one last thing. We've got to plan properly. We need proper planning about where these facilities will be.
With the Labour Party, I've been living in Canberra and Pierce for 10 years. I've seen a sign before last local election at Silwood Drive about the extension of the road. Now, you are doing a little bit of digging. I think that the accountability is lost here because people are not stupid. Second thing for the Liberal, I heard stories that Canberran are extremely progressive to vote Liberal, and they have an issue. About 20 years ago, Canberran lost faith in Liberal for something that they haven't delivered about. So to say that you would like change for the sake of change without selling your vision, good luck. For the animal rights, can I ask last question? It's about social justice and the human right. I'm animal lover, like yourself, but there is a massacre that it's happening in Palestine, Lebanon, and the Green passed the motion about divestment and the ethical responsibility that was blocked by both Labour and Liberal. Canberran are fed income people. What would you say about that? Thank you.
Didn't hear a question there. I just heard you know.
Anyone want to say anything else? Anything want to say anything about the Liberals' current stance? Maybe give it 1 minute.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. We've laid out a very positive agenda for Canberra. Obviously, as an opposition, we've got a job to do, which is to critique the government. I think we've done that effectively over the last 4 years. You can go to our website. You can ask me a question on any policy area. We've laid out a very comprehensive policy agenda, and we're not hiding anything from the electorate, that's for sure.
Yeah, Harini Rangarajan from the ACT Greens Party. I just wanted to say, I think it's preposterous that the two major parties have not taken a stance on divestment, considering the fact that hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money is being invested into weapons companies and Israeli settler adjacent companies, which I think is unacceptable. I mean, talk about waste, right? We were talking about the Liberal Party loves to pitch their, you know, the position that the Labour and the Greens government has been wasting money. But I think it's absolutely unacceptable that we're putting money towards war. And I think that we need to be taking a stance against it. Jeremy Hansen in this room actually asked Rebecca Vassaroli to remove her keffiyeh in the assembly, which is unacceptable considering that there's at least 40,000 Palestinians dead at the moment. And I think, and I'm very proud of the fact that the ACT government, the ACT Greens are the only party that stands for divestment, for boycott and sanctioning the Israeli apartheid state.
And now another online question via Rachel.
To the Greens, why were the Geocon towers allowed to be built without room for a blade of grass in between the buildings? It has created a huge heat bank. So the question is, why were they allowed to be built?
I think that's a really good demonstration of why the planning regulations needed to change. Now, we went through a raft of changes to the planning regulations last year, but I think there's still more work that could be done to improve planning in the ACT to encourage biodiversity within our suburbs, to make sure that we're able to have both more housing and green spaces. The previous planning laws didn't allow that. The current planning laws go some way to improving it, but there is absolutely more that can be done, and we would very much like to make those improvements.
I would just like to say I think you've had more than enough time to make those changes, and they haven't happened. So when I walk through Woden now, it is just a huge building after huge building. It is literally a concrete jungle. For a Greens party not to have pushed for some sort of small urban forest, rooftop gardens, something like the floral arrangements on Nishi, for nothing to have been put in place around Woden, it has become a grey and faceless area, which is extremely unpleasant to be in.
Yeah, so I agree with Emma that I think the geocon towers is a good example of why the planning system needed to change. And and we changed it. And so massive law reform there to change it to an outcomes-based system. And this was because of the feedback we got from the community and recognising the need for the amenity and sustainability of the builds and that community connectedness. And you can see that in the sale of the land beside the Hellenic Club, well, it was sold to the Hellenic Club, which will have a whole lot of community amenity as part of that build, as part of an outcomes-based system. The new CIT build there, that will have squares and green spaces. Edison Park, we're looking at a master plan there. That whole valley and sporting area, I think is a huge asset to Woden.
There was nothing stopping the government getting good outcomes in Woden under the previous planning system. It's a cop-out to say the new outcomes-based system will change things. It takes the planning directorate to put good plans in place, to let the developers know when the plans come in what isn't acceptable. They're just letting them get away with too much, and it's going right through to compliance. Things are not being complied with, plans aren't being complied with, the build isn't being complied with, and it's just a free-for-all. And the outcomes-based thing is deregulating the system, and we will see how it goes, but potentially this free-for-all will continue.
Family First uses a prism of the family in its design and planning perspective. And so, like, in terms of a blade of grass, we're interested in how children are going to have access to green space, how families are actually going to live healthy lifestyles with planning that's conducive to intergenerational families. So we put through a family prism to ensure that apartment buildings have a livability that's conducive to people being in them. Thank you.
Yep. You can probably guess what I'm going to talk about. There's a lot of really good feelings in the room tonight about Phillip Pool, which is really great to hear. It's been a mess for a long time, and I think the time's right for some smart goals. We need some actual policies. We need some actual announcements about what's going to happen with that site. It's great to have all this good feeling and the good conversations, but this is the last chance we're going to get this election to make a plan about what's happening about Phillip Pool. You know, is there a chance to save it? Because otherwise the land's all going to be divided up. It's going to be sold and we're going to lose that. And once we lose these community facilities, we don't get them back. So my question is, does anyone want to up the ante and make a sort of time-bound announcement about what's happening next with Phillip Pool? Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. So as I said before, the government doesn't own the land that Phillip Pool is on. So it's not, it is, but Geocon owns it. And that is a long time ago. But the bottom line is the government doesn't own the pool site. There is lease conditions on that site for a 25-metre pool and a children's pool. As I said before, I don't think it's a particularly great outcome to have a public pool under a Geocon tower, but that is the current state of play. And when Geocon, you know, comes out eventually with their development application, we'll see what their proposal is. And as I said, I would like to see them pay their way out of their lease and see a public pool in Woden.
We'll have some announcements around what we're delivering for Woden coming up really soon. But let me say right now that it never should have been sold. We've been missing out in the south for too long. We've seen sporting facilities go backwards. We've lost the CIT site. It's been turned into a car park. All we've got now is going from a 50,000 site to a 5,000 square metre site. It's too long that we've been putting up with seeing so many community facilities disappearing from Woden, and we will reverse that.
Okay, you ready? Can you all hear me? Look, I'd like to move away from the planning reform that we didn't really have. It's a shocking thing. Wasted 3 years of my life on something that achieved nothing. Okay, put aside those feelings. I've got a question for, I think, Marissa, Jeremy, and Emma, or whoever represents you, and Fiona, yes, about the grid. Electricity grid. There was a great article in The Guardian the other day from a fellow called Adam Morton. I suggest you read it. We've got two things going on. Our grid is changing. So we're going from having these big coal-fired, smoke-belching power stations to more diverse supply. And secondly, we have greater demand at a local level. But what we're also experiencing is the energy in the climate is leading to greater disruption. So what I want to know is, what are you going to do or commit to ensure grid reliability over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years?
Thanks, Bill. Look, some of it's at the local level, some is at the federal level. One thing that we have is that we're not going to just have a solution that is all electrical, you know, all solar and all renewable. That we see that gas remains an important part of the solution, and we're not going to ban people's wood fires either. At a federal level, obviously, the Federal Coalition has announced that it will have nuclear plants, which take a lot of pressure, and the requirement to extend the grid. You might not like it, but it's a very viable solution. We're probably not going to get a debate on it here tonight, but it is a solution, Bill, that we have at the local level and the federal level. We understand it, and simply putting everything onto renewable and getting rid of those other options, not having the diversity in the power sources, is going to lead to some real problems, particularly as we electrify things like electric vehicles and with AI.
Yes, Bill, absolutely. We're committed to reducing emissions and recognise the electricity supply has been a really important issue, which is why Labor is investing in the big Canberra battery to see energy supply secured into the future. We are leading Australia in this reform. There's recently been a workshop run with ANU academics, and there's been a lot of modelling done around the electricity supply and how that can be secured in Canberra for the future. And this is a really innovative, significant project for the ACT. We've also seen the Sustainable Household Fund scheme, which is seeing incentives and interest-free loans for households to go to solar community batteries. This is something I've been strongly advocating for, particularly Swinger Hill residents have been very strong in their advocacy on this issue. So yeah, I support them with that.
Am I audible? Yeah. Rini Rangarajan from the ACT Greens Party. In terms of the grid, one of our biggest commitments this time around is to make sure that we're delivering an additional 300 megawatt battery storage for the ACT as we move away from, as we move towards more sustainable energy grid. And I think with that comes a holistic plan to electrify Canberra, and one of that is to make sure that we are helping 5,000 of the lowest income households in order to electrify their households. We also want to prohibit the installation of new gas appliances from 2027, and we want to make sure that all new public homes that we're going to build is going to be completely electrified. Thank you.
Thank you. As an architect, I've got an interest in this space, but actually the Family First have a sort of national policy around the energy grid was designed to deliver energy, not to transport energy. And has there been a study, I think they called it an engineering analysis of the whole grid to say what is the right outcome for the grid? We need some benefit when renewables aren't coming down. So either that's gas-fired, smaller stations that back up the grid when we don't have batteries, or we have batteries. But with batteries, it's not a silver bullet. I've started building an electric car for training. We haven't recycled any car batteries. It takes 6 years for the embodied energy in a Tesla to become neutral. If that car's damaged, well, let's have the debate. Because I think that, in The Guardian, you mentioned The Guardian, there was a report on solar panels becoming more e-waste. So in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, the renewable grid will need to be replaced. We aren't talking longer term. We're only planning for the next 10, 20 years. We're not planning for 60.
Okay. Hi. I moved to Australia and Canberra about 10 years ago. Before that, I lived in 5 different countries around the world. And I have to say, and this is very positive, I love living here. I really, really like Woden. But when I go to, yeah, go ahead. But when I go to some of our new suburbs, I get really shocked because these suburbs around us, it's Curtin, Garran, Chifley, etc., etc. They're built in a really nice way. You don't have to cross the streets with the cars. You get access to free space. You can breathe. You can go in the corridors of nature and so on and so on. So my question for myself is, how on earth can people change that when it's such a great concept? But my question to you is, what's your stand on this? And what are you actually going to do about microclimate? Because if we don't change microclimates around us, it's going to be horrible to live in Woden. And I want to be able to have my family and other families live here for generations.
Do I get to go? As an architect as well, this is a very good question. There's actually some planning around some of the newer suburbs, dare I say it, are quite good. The housing outcomes, the housing options aren't so good because we only have one model of housing. The compactness of those suburbs is actually really good. There's some green spaces and there's some positives to those newer spots. the challenge is around redeveloping older spots. We have a lot more green space, and what do we do with those? So sure, land is expensive. Green spaces are not. We used to have community forums that would talk about what sort of housing options. I had a guy on the street say, we should develop our older suburbs to more community minded. So we're looking at aging, intergenerational. It was a great vision for what it could be. And I think that's what we do need, is some vision.
So we have a slightly different view than the government. That if you look at the draft district plans that they've released, it's all about infill. It's all about trying to identify all of the green space and building on it. And they did it in this yellow shade. And there's almost none of Canberra, particularly in the south, that wasn't coloured in yellow. We have a very different view. Now, that does mean building out. And we do want to have more options for families in particular to grow in suburbs where there's more space. And that does mean releasing more land. And we've released quite comprehensive policies around that. So, yes, there is a place for infill, but it's a pretty brutal infill that this government's proposing. And we reject that. And what we want to do is build out so that we can maintain that really important character of those suburbs that we love, and not see everything turn into, a concrete jungle as parts of Canberra are.
Yes, for the last 4 years of looking at the planning review, and community councils have been engaging in good faith on that. And part of the issue about microclimates and making our suburbs resilient in the face of global warming is basically to ensure that there's a certain amount of green space and I'm talking not only about in the street, but in private open space, so that there is actually an amount of enough room for canopy cover, for vegetation, permeable soil, so people can grow things which will reduce the temperature. And there's I think about 10-degree difference in temperature between the established suburbs and the new suburbs. So we have to insist and actually evaluate whether the new planning system is going to ensure this, because if it doesn't, we really need to make changes to that, because we've previously had rules about that, and now we have design guides. So I think an important step will be to look at what the experience has been in the last year of the new system.
Ashley from the AJP. So the survey that came out, I've got it right here. The third most popular thing was limited growth in Woden Valley. New growth should happen elsewhere, which I completely agree. If you want to live here, I think that the growth needs to happen elsewhere. I think we need to keep our green spaces. I think we need to repair our roads and our streets first before we grow new stuff. We can grow brand new concrete jungles. That's fine. They look horrible and there is absolutely no green space, which is horrible for the environment. But you need to fix the old stuff first, which I think is really important in our roads with our potholes, safe travel for the elderly, stuff like that. So I think that needs to happen first before we focus on growing Woden. Grow out first before here. Thank you.
Marisa?
Yes, so we've got the urban forest strategy, which sees, and the ACT government's committed to planting 54,000 trees, and we planted about that many this term. We're committed to seeing there's 40% canopy cover in some of the older suburbs and less so in the newer suburbs. I will stand up for Molonglo Valley in saying it's actually very well planned. It is a great example of diverse range of housing options and bringing density in, has beautiful parks and green spaces and active travel routes coming, and Stromlo Forest. It is an amazing place to live. Sure, the trees have to grow, and it is different to our existing suburbs, but I do believe that it is a very great example of where development can take us in terms of we do need housing very desperately at the moment, and Labor's committed to 30,000 more houses by 2030. We need the density and we need infill, because our environment just isn't going to take continuous sprawl. And so ACT Labor views this in a measured way. We see 70% infill. That's what we're committed to. Light rail, the corridors there, we've seen the success in the north of Canberra.
Emma Davidson, ACT Greens. Now, the Greens have been campaigning really hard for years to get the 30% tree canopy targets that we have. What we want to do is require the government to actually report on tree canopy and green space and to be able to ensure that everyone has access to green space in their area, to local parks and to reserves. We want to review our planning system in 2 years to specifically look at our green spaces, the supply of them and also the maintenance of them to make sure that we're doing things that work for future generations.
This is completely separate. I was sorry to interrupt. I'm going to leave. I had a total hip replacement 8 days ago, and my pain relief has been wearing off over the last hour or so. So I can't drive. My daughter is going to drive me home and come back. So thank you very much, and I apologise to have to go early, but it was a bit of a long evening to sit.
Hello, Hello, good evening. My name is Nazmul Hassan. I'll just give a brief story. So during COVID time, I was giving free meals to Canberra, and that's where I discovered with wonderful community, the richness, and the the community that we have beautiful, wealthy. There is a patches in our cities where communities, families are really struggling. And so this was my personal level, and then community support. I've delivered thousands of meals in Canberra. Then I started an organization. But what Rahimun, which currently we are serving the vulnerable people. There is no system currently, and I had a great deal of discussion with all the politicians that supports those vulnerables. I mean, there are patches of various organizations does it, and government has some system, but it's not very effective at all. My question is, what is your policy for, in general, this cost of living, particularly supporting these vulnerable community? I would say they're not poor, but they're really struggling. Second question is, very quickly, I'm a very passionate multicultural community person, and I do it for a lot of communities. When I look at the ACT Legislative Assembly, it does not represent the cultural community here in the ACT. And all of you in the future leaders, very passionate that Canberra is a liberal state. Canberra is a very passionate, progressive. But what policy are you bringing to promote those reflecting that multiculturalism in the parliament, in the decision-making process? APS, SES, I think PMNC has a strategy.
I'm going to have to sack myself for allowing that multiple question. Sorry, everybody. Okay, who would like to?
Thank you for those two questions. The second question with respect to diversity in the Legislative Assembly, I hope you would see diversity amongst candidates pretty much from every group and party. So yeah, it does indeed. Well, what we have done in the process in Independence for Canberra is selected some very electable candidates that stand on their own ground and hopefully will get elected on their own merit. The first question that you talked about the future of Canberra and the vulnerable people and the people, I think, in that category between increasing struggle with cost of living. And in Independence for Canberra, we want people to look up and out 10 years, 20 years down the track, diversify the economy. If we look 10 and 20 years, we don't want to keep building police stations, keep building women's refuges, keep building community services. We want to live up to the sophisticated, educated city that we want to be. And so we'd like to see people looking up and out.
Well, I think all of the parties make a real effort to work with multicultural communities. I just make the point that Elizabeth Lee, our leader, is of Korean descent. She's the first Asian to lead a political party in Australia. So we're very proud of that. Your husband's a Sri Lankan, okay? Amardeep's not here tonight, but if you met Amardeep Singh, if you said to him he's a token candidate to get the rest of us elected, let me tell you, he would disagree with that, my friend. Okay? He's probably out winning votes. That's right. We're all nervous of Amardeep. We think he's going to get elected instead of us, don't we, Ed? So, so let me assure you that the candidates that the Canberra Liberals have selected, whatever their background, male, female, whatever their ethnic background is, they're there to win it. They're there to get into the Assembly. And that's, I'm sure would be the same in all the other parties, to be frank.
I just want to pick up on that. It's Nelson Tang here from ACT Labor. ACT Labor has fielded a very diverse range of candidates in this election, and we're not token candidates. I'm not a token candidate. I've taken the role very seriously. I've door knocked over 16,000 doors as of last weekend, talking to our community, because I think it's important that I take the role very seriously. And yeah, I just want to say I'm not there as a token candidate. I do want to be elected.
Emma Davidson, ACT Greens. I'm going to say one thing and pass to Harini. The Greens will commit more funding to food relief services. Harini.
Yeah, as to your question about multicultural candidates, I can tell you all about how the ACT Greens have been making it a priority to include multicultural candidates and candidates from all walks of life. I am a 20-year-old uni student who has origins in India, who's also queer, so I know that the ACT Greens have been committing to putting, people from different intersections into positions of leadership. And the other one is that while I do think that there needs to be, diversity in candidates and representation, I think that starts by actually expanding our voter franchise. And the ACT Greens are the only party right now that are going to ensure that permanent residents have a right to vote in our elections. I don't think you can elect multicultural candidates if they aren't being represented. There's over 40,000 people who are permanent residents, and I think it's important that they are included in the decision-making process since they live here as well. Thank you.
I'd like to speak to you first, but thank you very much for your service and helping these people in Canberra. I think it's not necessarily the leaders. Quotas aren't necessarily a good thing, and there's lots of stories. My father was a migrant. There's lots of stories if we get to know people. I think I'm more concerned for some of the construction workers that don't speak any English on building sites, and they have an interpreter. And I'm really worried for their actual living conditions and working conditions and pay conditions, because I feel like they aren't being serviced in an honourable and integrity way. They're being, some of them are slaves to a system that we use, and I don't think it's right. And I think that's where we should really address the inequalities.
Thank you very much, Nazmul, for the question. I think it goes beyond political parties as well. And I think the ACT government, we passed the multiculturalism.
Sorry, Marissa, we've had a 2 bites of the cherry problem there. Sorry about that. Got to be consistent. So we've got an online question via Rachel.
I've had several questions in relation to this topic, so I'm just I've smashed them together. What is each party's / independent stance on the light rail? And I'll actually broaden that out to be transport in general.
Emma Davidson, ACT Greens. The Greens have been really clear about the fact that our growing population is going to need a good mass public transport system in the future. It takes time to build that, and so we've made a start on building that light rail system. We'd like to see that building happen faster. But in the meantime, we know that we need to get around right now as well. And if we get another 100 electric buses with drivers on the road, we can get a bus every 20 minutes on the weekday, every 30 minutes on weekends, and that will help a lot of people to get around our city while light rail is being built.
And what will happen for all the workers?
Rima, Independent. So on my platform, I have actually tapped on that. I don't actually support the light rail. I think it's costing a lot of money. It's going to take too long to be completed. And I would rather support an enhanced bus network system with more routes, with more frequent buses on weekends and public holidays, possibly with electric buses. I feel the light rail will have its problems besides the cost. People need to travel to the light rail. It's not going to be an easy commute to the light rail, so still people need to use cars. There are no parking spots to be able to park your car and actually access the light rail. So I feel $4,000 million will be better directed towards relieving the community from the financial stress, such as cost of living and healthcare and other things. Thank you.
Well, I hope by now you know the Canberra Liberals won't be supporting the light rail, or we haven't done our job very well. We do not support stage 2B. It'll be at least $4 billion. It's going to cause massive disruption. The opportunity cost, the money that needs to be spent in health and education and elsewhere across our community is too important. It's going to be slower than the current bus. The R4 is about 15 minutes into town. The tram will take longer, and you're going to see the cancellation of direct services, just as they did in Gungahlin. And you're going to see high rise. Ed and I were out the other day, and so is Fiona, where we're already seeing the disruption that's going to happen along Adelaide Avenue and Yarra Glen with power substations, and they're going to put high rise there. So we've got a plan that is a very comprehensive plan, which is about more electric buses to increase the number of routes and to increase frequency.
So ACT Labor believes that we need a comprehensive transport plan in Canberra, and that includes light rail, it includes buses, it includes active travel networks. We're talking about, it's been mentioned tonight, you know, the South Side feeling there's lack of investment. If you really want to see a tale of two cities, well then don't send light rail to Woden, because the investment that's gone with stage 1, 26% increase in businesses in growth, 6,000 population growth, the number of housing along the light rail corridor. The South Side will miss out. I guarantee you, if we don't get light rail to Woden, it will be a tale of two cities. The investment, the growth, the generation that comes from light rail, it's for future-proofing our city, and seeing the South Side connected to the North is so important. Thank you.
I just want to see great public transport. I'm mode agnostic. In a city, there's a place for light rail, there's a place for buses. But we hear that the current network is taking too long. There's too many changes. We don't have the coverage that we used to have before. Bus stops have shut. People are having to walk too far. The economic advantage is in the north, in the city where the higher education is. People from the south need to get to that higher education, and they need to be able to get there effectively and efficiently. So my view is that we have time to do a proper options analysis to see what is the best backbone for our city, for people that live in Tuggeranong, Western Creek, Molonglo, for all of us, because that is the only way to have the underpinning analysis to inform us, because at the moment we've just got captain's picks for it, captain picks pick against it. It may very well be electric buses, but let's just have the underpinning analysis to tell us that.
My question is on something that hasn't been raised tonight, and that's housing. It's very exciting to see a youth foyer coming into Woden as part of the CIT. My question is, what is each party's views on bringing more social and affordable housing, particularly into Woden, into this great town centre with such great accessibility that is really helpful for our vulnerable people?
Thank
Yeah,
you. It is unusual. Oh, I beg your pardon, Emma, after you.
go. Okay. Emma Davidson, ACT Greens. The ACT Greens believe that we need to build another 10,000 public homes over the next 10 years to meet the needs of people who are already on a waiting list that is far too long, as well as our growing population. We know that there are too many people who are currently in the private rental market that actually should be in a public housing property where they know that they'll have a secure roof over their head that meets their needs, that is built using universal design principles, to be Class C accessible, so that they know that this is somewhere they can stay well into their future. If we can do that, that will take some of that pressure off, not just for people who are already on low incomes, but for everyone else in the private rental market as well. If we can also provide protections for people in the private rental market so that rents are not constantly going up faster than your wages are going up to be able to keep up with paying it, we will also see fewer people ending up in housing stress.
Thank you, Anne Louise, Independence for Canberra. I agree that there needs to be a diversity of options. Over time, the ACT in a number of ways, the ACT government has drifted away from some of the schemes that the Commonwealth have available, including community housing. If we are to maximise our affordability, we need to look at different options that are emerging in the community sector that the government could perhaps get behind. For example, Centrecare are building a hostel-style thing like old days of Canberra, where to get nurses and disability workers and people who work in aged care, they're building community housing. So I think the solution looks like getting developers who are required to have a certain percentage that are affordable to have an audit of preventing them selling them to family members. So it's a combination of all the housing options, I think, is what good looks like.
Thank you. So ACT Labor is strongly committed to social and public housing in the ACT. So this term we've seen 614 public housing homes built, 176 bought, and a further 450 are in the current pipeline through development application processes. We also have the $80 million Affordable Housing Fund, which will see 280 new affordable rentals in the territory come up soon, and over half of them will be in Phillip and in Curtin. So we're committed to seeing affordable housing, build-to-rent projects are part of that Affordable Housing Fund. The 2003 ROGS data showed that the rate of social housing dwellings per capita in the ACT is 1.6 times the national average. This is something that ACT Labor is strongly committed to. We need more social and affordable housing in the ACT. Thank you.
Elise Hazelhurst, Canberra Liberals. So the Canberra Liberals are committed to increasing public housing by an additional 2,000. This includes partnering with community housing providers to allow them to manage more public housing properties and social housing properties, and also to be able to provide them with the opportunity to develop more than we can currently do. We also want to develop a pilot program which will allow key workers to attract key workers and retain key workers through a rental and purchase scheme through another housing provider company called Hope Housing, which allows people in key working such as nurses, doctors, disability workers, teachers, early childhood educators, to name a few, to allow them to be able to purchase homes on a shared equity basis, which allows them to be able to get into the ACT at a higher level than we currently do. Thank you.
Bruce Payne, support candidate for Fiona Carrick. I live in Red Hill. Those of you who would be who are familiar with that area, there was a large public housing site behind the Red Hill shops. It was basically a premium, as in there were actual people living there, been there for decades. When the consultation was being done on for the site with the local community, I want to stress the local community was not against retaining some public housing there. And that was where, my clear recollection is, that was where the consultation ended. Nevertheless, when the site was sold, somehow, as what happens in this town, there was no public housing retained, zero. So I roll my eyes when I hear Labor and Green, talk about public housing. That also occurred, Maria told me, with Stewart Flats in the inner south and probably many other areas, and Northbourne Avenue. I think we need to do better.
One of the early metrics for affordable housing, I think, was a dwelling that cost less than $360,000. I think that's changed now. I think it's gone up. But as a builder, cheap houses aren't good, and good houses aren't cheap. We aren't the only country building houses, yet where are the examples that Canberra, Australia's capital, has? There's been plenty of models that have tried to get off the ground, tried to be these little co-housing. I think there's one maybe out for women out near Strommer. It looks great, but where is the leadership? Where is the vision? Where are the examples that we can all walk in and see, touch and feel, and hear stories of, learn from? Why are we waiting so long for action? Why aren't we just trialing something? I mean, we can spend, $4 billion on a tram. Why can't we spend, I don't know, $1 million on a little development? It just doesn't make sense.
Okay, we're nearly out of time, folks. This has been so good. I've learned so much. Fascinating responses. After this, of course, we get to mill about, have deeper discussions with the candidates. So don't feel this is the end. This is just the end of this bit. But we've only got a few minutes left. We're going to do one online question and your two questions. And this question is an online question for the Liberals exclusively. So whoever gets to answer it has 2 minutes if they want it. Rachel.
Can the Liberal Party please tell us what they will do for our electorate if they are elected? And they've gone on to say, please do not condemn the other parties when you answer the question. So a positive response, please.
Sure. Yeah, look, we've released a whole bunch of policies, so you can have a look at them online. But in the health space, we have committed to Northside Hospital, and we have got significant incentives for general practice. We'll also have a Royal Commission into health. We think that the solutions to health are both short-term, and we've announced a bunch of those, but also long-term. And I think we need to break the electoral cycle when it comes to fixing our health system. With regard to education, we've announced a whole bunch of money for facilities, but we've also, building on the work that the Canberra Liberals did to instigate an inquiry into literacy and numeracy. That is a motion in the Assembly that I moved last October. There was a independent review that's come back with 11 recommendations, and we've committed $98 million towards that. We've allocated $100 million towards renewing our suburbs. We think it's very important that the government realises a lot more to Canberra than just the inner city. We need to make sure that we refurbish, renew, rehabilitate many of our rundown local shops, local areas out there. We've committed over $65 million to a range of supports for addressing cost of living that are out there. And principal amongst the cost of living measures is our commitment to rates. We've said that we will cap rates at 2.2%. We also have a very different vision when it comes to housing. We want to make sure that the city, as it grows, and we know that it's going to be growing in the next few decades significantly, we're going to reach 750,000. We don't want to just have infill. We don't want everybody forced to live in apartments. We will release a lot more land, and we have released a very aggressive, or ambitious, I should say, schedule in terms of making sure that we release more land. We don't want to flood the market, but we don't want a situation where people just simply cannot afford to buy. So that's my time up, but I could keep going if you want me to.
We've heard a lot of people talking about what they're going to do in the future. I want to know what you have done in the past, in particular in supporting the 3 community councils that are in the Murrumbidgee electorate in Western South Canberra and here in Woden. So my question is for each of you to say a number. How many council meetings each of you, not a party, each of you have attended in the last 12 months? And how will you support, if you are elected, the 3 community councils? 4. Is it 4? Molonglo. Oh, Molonglo, 4. Okay. So I'd just like to start off with a number from each of you from 0 to whatever, starting here. Is that possible?
Yeah, that's fine.
Good.
Let's get a number for each person. Yeah. 2, do you want me to mention? No, just the number.
Yeah, I can't give you a number, but many over 16 years. So
I couldn't give you a number.
I don't know, 5, 6.
I couldn't give you a number.
I don't keep a running total, but everyone I can possibly get to. I am, but I couldn't tell you exactly how many. Every couple of months I'm at them. Everyone that I can make it to.
None.
0. What is that, 5?
Well, I used to chair them, so. Probably, and then a number of days, probably over 15, 20 last year. Over 20, at least 10 last year.
I appreciate the honesty of the candidates, by the way.
I'm very conscious of time, so I'll make this as simple a question as possible. Although there is a small preamble. A recent report found that the ACT has the highest per capita gambling losses from poker machines in Australia. The Labor Greens government's policy of reducing poker machine licences has done nothing to reduce gambling harm, as gambling losses across the territory have continued to rise. A recent Assembly Committee inquiry heard from a number of experts that a centralised monitoring system combined with mandatory bet and spending limits is the most effective way to reduce gambling harm from poker machines. Those experts included the Director of the ANU Centre for Gambling Research, the position I note formerly held by Murrumbidgee Patterson. My question for each candidate is, will you support the introduction of a centralised monitoring system with mandatory bet and spending limits to start reducing the scourge of gambling harm caused by poker machines across Canberra?
Go first in this one. Yep. As a national policy, we'd actually like to ban gambling completely. And as a minimum, we'd like the cap.
Yes.
Next, Emma? Yes. Next.
Yes, it'd be with the worst in Australia and the worst in the world. It's time to do something. Yes, as well.
Yes. So a centralised monitoring system is in the ballpark of $180 million. ACT Labor views that as a significant investment in machines. We want to see machines reduced in the territory. Our policy platform is to see a reduction of machines over the next 20 years to 1,000 by 2045. We are going to implement cashless gaming where you can implement
bet limits and spend limits through cashless gaming. You don't need a centralised monitoring system to do that. A centralised monitoring system is an accounting tool. It is not a harm reduction measure. You need a cashless gaming system on top of a CMS to implement these harm reduction measures. We view a CMS as a significant investment in machines. You cannot continue to reduce machine numbers in the ACT, which has been the government policy for the last 2 terms. And we've currently got the ACT gambling.
In terms of central monitoring, we want to see what we can do to link in with New South Wales. But if you want to get rid of pokey machines, a good start would be to get them out of the Labor clubs, Marisa.
Can I congratulate you all on a magnificent event? I have not seen such good sense, good humour and mutual regard and respect in a group for a long time. So well done you, and continue the conversation afterwards. There's a hotbed of activity, interest, passion about local issues evident tonight. All I can say is keep going. Vote. Thank you.